Welcome to No Options with Ty Gibson, the show where life's toughest trials become the foundation for your greatest triumphs. Real stories, raw conversations, and the unwavering belief that you were built to overcome. Now, here's your host, Ty Gibson.
Hey guys, it is awesome day, and I'm excited. This is some of the interviews I get to do is I meet for the first time, but I can tell you today we've got Miranda Bradley, and she and I have been friends for years. And but the cool thing about it is we're going to hear some stuff today about Miranda that I hope that somebody that's going through some of the things that Miranda's been through, we can help you with, right? But I will tell you this, I've known Miranda for many years, and until about, a month ago, I had no idea of some of these things. So Miranda, thank you for being on here today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes. So let's jump into this. We talk about, all the time I'm always talking about, hey, no options, and let's push through adversity. How do we overcome things? And I talk about that a lot through things I've been through. And when I talked to you about a month ago, as I said, boy, adversity came all over the place. I mean, you were talked to me and shared with us some stories that I just thought would be amazing. So let's start out, though. I even want to start back to your childhood, Miranda. You grew up in Louisiana, right? Great
Correct.
State of Louisiana. I was close. I was down there in Orange, Texas, which was almost Louisiana, but you
Yep.
grew up deep in Louisiana. And so share with us a little bit of your childhood and kind of what you dealt with as a child.
Well, it was a very, very small area where I grew up. A lot of people are familiar with Shreveport, but my original upbringing started in a little place called Spring Hill and Sarepta, that area, and teeny tiny dot on a map. Still to this day, you can't find it unless you're trying. But my first memory of my childhood was of my parents fighting behind their bedroom door. And my father was an alcoholic. I wouldn't find this really out until I wouldn't put the pieces together until I was older, but he was an alcoholic and also enjoyed womanizing and enjoyed drinking and doing some drugs. And my mom was a straight arrow, right, when she met my dad. And so they sort of were forced into marriage, and it wasn't necessarily a happy union, and my dad resented us, I guess, but he was hitting her through the bedroom door. And I remember being really little. I don't think I was in school yet. So I was probably 3 or 4, crying about it. I was crying for my mom outside the bedroom door. And my brother, his bedroom was kind of across the hallway. He's only about 4.5 years older than me. But I just kept, because I'm very determined, I kept calling for her. And my mom, I could hear her on the other side of the bedroom door crying and telling me to go back to bed. And finally, my dad had this real booming voice, and he was terrifying. And so I heard him bellow, go back to bed, Nikki. That's what they called me. And so I ran back to my brother's room, and he was laying there. He could hear everything. And he just opened the sheets up and had me crawl in, and we just laid there until it was over. And then the next day, it might have been later that day or the next day, he left. My mother made him leave. But what was interesting about that is, like, my mother was the first divorce in the family. And it was back in the time when no matter what, you got married, you stayed married, Yeah. You did. And honestly, even later in her life, when she would talk to her brother, who my Uncle Gary came to the house to oversee my dad leaving so that, he would get out of the house. He still didn't want to accept that my mother had been abused by my dad. So it was one of these things you didn't even talk about. But my father was very complicated, right? He could be so charming. Like, he was the guy who could sell ice to an Eskimo, man. He was an insurance salesman. He's very good looking, Very charming. But then when he got mad, which was quickly, you better just run for cover. He had a temper. And he wasn't afraid to take it out on us, right? So we got a lot of that, and a lot of the abuse was emotional, right? For me, for my brother, got a lot more of the he got emotional abuse too, but he got a lot more of the fists and the belts and the beatings. I mean, talking from like age 2. There's a story of him being covered in bruises. But really, I think the biggest damage, because when you're a kid, and you're someone who's used to that kind of wrath, you sort of know how to prepare yourself, right? You sort of steel yourself for the belt, or you steel yourself for the hit. That that's going to be done. The longest term damage is the stuff like when my father would bring home kittens, and we would get really attached to these animals, right? And then when they got to be a nuisance to him, he would just wait until we were gone and get rid of them. He did this a lot with me, used animals to get me attached to something and then get rid of it, sell it. There's a story of when I was a teenager. Another thing you should know about my father is he was a serial marrier. Like I had about 4, maybe 5 stepmoms. I think I've lost count in my life by the time I was like 14. So it was a lot of that, having to adapt to new people in your life.
Sure. Now, Miranda, I've got a question on that. I mean, as a young child, and you and your brother, how did you guys process? Do you remember any of that? How you were processing this as a young child, and what were some of the thoughts and some of the things you mentioned? Kind of just getting together. And kind of, being together helped. Is there any other things that you did that kind of, and how did you process some of that?
Well, I learned really early not to trust anybody with anything, right? Don't trust anyone's motives, right? They're probably out for themselves, or they're going to hurt you in one way or another, right? So you don't trust people. You pretend like you do. And that was another thing I learned, was how to put on sort of a it's fine persona, right? You like, with my dad particularly, I learned how to please, how to do things in the way he liked, so that I didn't get hurt or he wouldn't lose his temper, and I wouldn't get scared. And so I learned how to read the room, so to speak, and read him and learn how to adapt. My brother, I don't think ever, I mean, I don't think he's ever really healed, right? He's actually still single to this day. He's 54. And
well, I'm sure there's a lot of effects, right? I mean, you think about that. I would think, the mind's such a powerful thing, right? So y'all's minds as young kids, you're like your brother, maybe seeing that in his mind, he did not want to be part of that or engage in relationships like that. So I'm sure there was a fear, right? And then, you guys had to do a lot of, I guess, acting to some degree, because you had, like you said, you were having to act like you were, are doing things to make your dad feel like, keeping him happy so that nobody would get, in trouble, or doing the right things. And so I'm sure.
And not only that, like, I remember when there was one summer that, he bought me a horse for my birthday. It was like this sad little derelict horse that left alone in a field somewhere. So it wasn't like he had money. He just bought a horse off somebody who didn't want his anymore. And we trained that horse all summer, he and I, and it was the best summer we ever had together. Right. He was married to a different lady named Vicky. She was a horsewoman, and made him spend time with me, made him get off the bottle. And when he was off the bottle, he was a wonderful guy. So we spent all summer together, and I got really bonded to this horse. And I think I had started middle school. And as you do, you get kind of caught up in the school year. I think I'd missed a couple of weekends with him, and he sold my horse, which, if you've ever owned a horse, it's like another person. It's like a soulmate. And I remember him calling to tell me that, and I was maybe 14, and I remember thinking, don't let him hear you cry, because that's what he wants. Don't let him know he hurt you. So I just acted like it didn't matter, right? And that's the kind of thing you do. You just go, it's fine, I don't care. And then I called my mother bawling my eyes out because I was heartbroken. Right. And then she called him and ripped him a new one because she told him never to buy me another animal again, because this had happened so much. And This was the biggest blow. And we never talked about it again. Like my dad, we never talked about it. I never told him that broke my heart, because it gave him power. Mm-hmm. And at a young age, you learn, I can't allow someone to have that much power over me. I've got to learn how to take that away from them. So you steel yourself. And I think that I carried that a lot into my youth and my teenage years. I didn't get close to a lot of people for that reason, I was never one of those girls, even though I was like in dance team and a cheerleader. I never had the kind of group like a lot of girls that age have. I was never in cliques because I didn't trust people enough to be that close to me. Mm-hmm. And if I had friends, there was a wall between us, and I was like, I'll let you come this far. That's it. And I was like that with a lot of people.
I bet, in a way you had to learn to survive early. You really did. Where other girls your age had never dealt with that and had not probably had any concerns of that, mm-hmm. Where you were having to deal with things most people didn't. But what would you tell if there is somebody out there listening today that maybe is going through something like that at home? What would you say to them? What would something that you would just say, as far as how do I get help? How do you recommend them going and talking? What is it you would you look back on that and say, man, I wish I would have? Yeah. What would that be?
Well, my mother never knew these things were happening, right? She was working 3 jobs, and I think I knew she was overburdened, because she only had a high school diploma at the time. She was going to night school to get an associate's degree, which is one of the reasons my dad would get angry with her. But so we were poor. She was struggling to make ends meet, and I knew that she had these kind of burdens on her. So I never told her what was going on, even the hardest stuff, because in a way, I think I didn't want to jeopardize time with my dad, even though he was this complicated person. I loved my father, and I really wanted his approval. I wanted to be with him. And this is the complicated emotion that people who are surviving abuse deal with, right? They have this affinity for the person. They have a love for a person. And it's so hard for you to say, this isn't healthy for me. I need to get away from this person. I need to stop spending time with this person. Because ultimately you're hoping that something will change and you can do something that will make them happy, and it'll be okay. So you put the burden on yourself to make it better, right? Mm-hmm. So if I could, I would just say, tell somebody tell somebody about what's going on in your life, someone you trust, because I think my mother would have intervened, and I think she would have found a way to protect me in a way I didn't get protected. And I did feel a little abandoned by people. But some of that was my own fault because I wasn't open. My grandmother, who was my dad's mom, he would dump me off at her house when he didn't feel like, spending time with me or my brother. I loved her. She was we were so close. She knew my dad wasn't doing the right things, but I don't think she knew the extent. Had I said to her, he's got this terrible temper and he beats us, she would have put a stop to it, full on. But I think that's the number one thing, is you really do have to find someone that you can trust and understand that it's not your fault that these things are happening, right? You aren't going to be able to change that person. They have to change themselves. So the best thing you can do is find a way to protect yourself. And that's the first step.
Well, and I hope somebody out there that just heard that, if they're in that situation, finds that person they can trust. Because you just said it. And I hope that people understand, that, and you and I talked a little bit about this before the call, but outlasting temporary,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, let's think about that. Everything on this earth is temporary. We're temporary, right? I mean, but everything is temporary. We just got to be strong, and you've proven that, right? Being strong and pushing through.
Yeah.
And I again, we talk about in we're either growing or we're dying, and I talk about that in my section, right? We're getting better or we're not. And in your case, you didn't allow, which is really impressive. You didn't allow to get worse. You dealt with it, but with intentions to keep growing, and you didn't want to hurt others, and you didn't want. But the key thing that you mentioned a while ago, and I think is key to people to hear, is that go reach out to someone
Yeah.
that you trust and let them know. Maybe they can help you just from a conversation. Maybe there's things that can help you through that. Maybe they can put a stop to it, as you said, as
Yeah.
your grandmother would have done. But thank you for sharing that. And again, I mean, as a childhood, there's so many of us that have had different childhoods. We all have lived different childhoods, and I think there's a lot that have been down roads that weren't the perfect childhood. As we talked earlier, not everybody had picket fences, white fences around in a beautiful neighborhood and did their thing. But it's good to hear from people like you that have been through it and on the other side. And we're going to hear more about your success in a little bit, but to be able to get through it in a way that you did, as a young girl, I mean, you're still, I mean, not to even have the knowledge of really how to get through it. Obviously, the good Lord puts some strength in us to help us fight through things. And you definitely have shown that. So
Thanks.
I appreciate that.
I think also, I mean, I was just born with this sort of I'll show you mentality. I think, my father was really good at tearing you down because he was a good manipulator. And, he would tell me things all the time like, well, you're not smart, and, you're not pretty. So, or you'd be a lot prettier if, it was always kind of this sort of tearing you down to make sure that you stayed here, and not rose above. I think that terrified him. Right. So I just never let those doubts keep me from trying. I remember when I said, I think I'm going to go out for Miss Texas, right? The Miss America pageant. My father looked at me. I'm 5'0". Always have been, like since I stopped growing, right? I mean, I just 5'0". And he looked at me. He said, well, you're not tall enough to do that. I was like, oh, really? Okay. And sure enough, I won a title like in the next month. And then I went on to Miss Texas and I did that 3 different times and I did quite well. But, the surest way to get me to do something is to tell me I can't. Yeah. And that was born out of my dad's, right? My dad's little, attempts at keeping me from achieving things, even college. So I will not, and I refuse to this day, let someone tell me I can't do something. To ask my husband, okay? He will vouch for that.
That could be a whole nother conversation. Well, I do say, and let's think about that for a minute, though. Some of the characteristics of your dad being, sounds like maybe stubborn a little bit, hard-headed. You took some of those characteristics and you made them into a positive, though, right? Being, not letting you be told you can't. Pushing through adversity when a lot of people would give up, right? And so I think there's, everything we go through makes us stronger, right? And you're a prime example of that, of what you've been through. So let's keep going on your story, though. I don't want to stop there because it only gets more interesting and more encouraging that what all you went through, you were able to just push through and continue to go. Let's talk about that. That was the ages that got you through your childhood. Let's talk. Did you talk a little bit about the high school? Let's talk a little bit about high school and some of those days real quick.
Yeah,
kind of give me a little bit of that.
Before we do that, I do want to say this because this is an important piece. And this is something I think that people out there need to hear. Like, my dad's first wife, well, second wife, first stepmom, had a son, and I was molested. Let's just cut to the chase. I was molested for a couple of years. A lot of that is black. I don't have a memory of that time, but I do know what happened. This is a prime example of what we were just talking about. It's like talking to people, right? I was so terrified to tell my dad about this, right? Because I didn't know that I would be believed. I was terrified to tell my mother because the guy who was molesting me threatened to kill my mother. And in my little girl head, it was possible, right? And she was everything to me. She was my entire world. She was my stability. And it just scared me to no end. And I remember trying to tell my dad. So I attempted to I let him know that this person was smoking, and they basically got him in the room with his girlfriend who was smoking with him, and basically called me a liar, which meant my stepmother made my father beat me with a belt that night for lying, which I was not lying. And I remember that night saying to myself, okay, well, I can't tell him this other thing because I'm being punished for he's going to think I'm lying, and I'm going to get worse, right? Because the offense is worse. And I think I was maybe 7, if I'm putting the numbers together right, maybe younger. And when I look back on that now, I mean, there's still times I think to myself, not now, but up until, recent years, I was thinking to myself, maybe I did something to make that happen. Did I somehow entice this person, even though I was a tiny little girl? But you do that in your head. And I want people to know, people who have overcome sexual assault, sexual abuse, it is not your fault, right? And there is no shame in telling someone this is happening to you. It is okay to find, again, someone you can trust and explain that something is hurting you and you need help making it stop. I was so young, I didn't know how to make that happen. And my father was kind of MIA. I think he was off drinking somewhere or whatever. And I was without protection. And so I think that's really important. And, when you're dealing with an alcoholic, you never know who you're going to get, right? So I didn't have that trust factor with him that he would protect me. So in my little girl mind, I'd like to think so, but I didn't know that would happen. So I really wanted to touch on that simply because, yes, it's part of my story, but it's also, don't allow yourself to believe the lie that you are somehow responsible, and it's okay to talk about it.
And I think that's a great point, man. It's hard to hear this, but the fact that I think you said, it's not your fault. That's something that needs to be heard, because I think a lot of times, and you even mentioned it, is you start to blame yourself. What did I do? What did I do wrong to cause this? What did I do? So and
it affects your decisions later on. It affected my teenage years, which is kind of one of the reasons I wanted to touch on it, because you start thinking to yourself, well, I'm damaged goods anyway. I've got this predetermined path. My father's an alcoholic. We're poor. My mom is the only single mom I know back in the 80s. It was a big deal. I've already been, mistreated sexually. I've already had this sort of experience. So what does it matter? I don't really need to worry about my worth, because I'm not really worth much. So when you go into your teenage years and you're dealing with puberty, and your choices become, you just become a little more indiscriminate, I think.
Right. Well, so that leads right into your teenage years, right? So tell us a little bit about those years, and then I want to jump. Then I'll stop you, and then we'll jump right into the college.
Yeah. So you're gonna love this. So I went to a place called Airline High School, which was it was in Bossier. It was very, kind of wealthy, right? And everybody who I'd gone to school with, from elementary, we all went to middle school, we all went to high school, because it was a very small town at the time. So it's kind of the same circle of people, known you your whole life, all your baggage, so they think. And I remember I just never fit. I was kind of a theater girl, and I was an opera singer at 14. I was in the Shreveport Opera Guild, the youngest paid performer at the Shreveport Opera Guild. So that was my profession. I was a professional musician by the time I was 14 and doing theater and loved it. So I really didn't fit with the rah-rah, sis boom bah, cheerleader, football mindset. I really was, more of a thinker. But so I was already considering moving schools. And on my sophomore year, the man, who molested me, I think he got held back several years and showed up at my high school and started going to school there. That was very hard. And I was, at this point, my mother knew what had happened because I told her. It took a long time. It had just come out. Like I had just told her like a year before. And I told her it was happening and what was going on. And he started telling people that we'd had sex. Right. And nobody would believe me. They didn't believe my story. My brother had already gone before me to this high school. So we already had a reputation of like being kind of cool because my brother was a drummer and and I didn't date a lot. And this just paralyzed me. So my mother and I made the decision to transfer me. So I ended up going to Caddo Magnet, which was a fantastic school. Shout out to the Mustangs. But we went, I went there and it was an art school and it was very, all these really weird, eclectic people and it was great. I loved it. But I also didn't date within my circle because in my head, I was already way more mature and more experienced than all of these, young dudes. So I started dating a 23 or 24? 24-year-old, and I was 16. He was an airline pilot. Bad idea. Everybody that's listening, if you're a girl, don't do that. It's bad for you. And I just kind of went off. I started drinking a lot. I was in the bottle pretty early. My dad had got me drinking at 10 years old because he didn't like to drink alone. So we'd go through these drive-through beverage places, these beverage barns that they have in Louisiana, and he would get me fuzzy navels, and I was 10, and it was just, so I was already in the bottle. So I drank a lot. I ended up graduating by the skin of my teeth. I was on the outside, I looked like I was, Miss It, right? Sure. I was like president of a choir, and I was an officer in the dance team, and I was, doing all these extracurriculars, and I was voted Miss This and Miss That and everything. But inside of me, it was a completely different person, right? And I had to learn that skill of do what the crowd expects or what your audience needs. And then you suffer quietly, privately. Girls aren't supposed to complain, kind of thing.
Right.
So put a lot of pressure on myself to perform and get, because I was doing theater on the weekends. I was holding down a job. I was in the opera, and I was trying to succeed at all of the things, so that I could be admired and appreciated, right? And my father, at this point, my brother had stopped going to his house. So it was just me when my father would show up. Sometimes he would say he was coming to get me and he wouldn't show. And I just I just started to expect that. And then there was this one time about this time in my life when I was at his house, and he threw parties. Like he threw kind of ragers with, teenagers and all kinds of people. And there was booze and, pills and, everything. And I was sitting there with this girl that he had dumped me off at her parents' house. This girl was 14 and like seriously disturbed, but I didn't know that. And he would leave us for a whole weekend by ourselves in this house with no parental supervision. And I'm 14. Wow. We had boys over, and I was still kind of naive in that, like, I didn't want, I was very nervous about the whole, like, don't touch me kind of sex thing, but like Sherry was all for it, right? And I was exposed to stuff that I just wasn't ready for. And we would walk the streets at 2 a.m. in this small town that was, we could have we could have easily been snatched up and nobody would have known what happened to us, right? Before cell phones. So this one weekend when he did have a big party at in his trailer, because it was a trailer park, he got upset with me because I got mouthy with him. I was 14, I was filling my oats. You know, you have a kid. And he reared back, and I looked at him straight on, and I said, go ahead. Go ahead. And he stopped himself, and then he just got mad and kind of stormed off, and I got up and I went to Mama's house because I was like, hell to the no, am I going to be your next? I'm not doing that, you know. And it just steeled something in me that, like, I became this sort of ready to rumble kind of person. And I had this sort of thuggish mentality of everybody's out to get me, so I got to be on the defensive. I got to be ready. And, you know, I kind of kept that attitude until I got to college. Like, just, I was always like,
Miranda, that's what you know, right? I mean, that's the way you were raised, right? You had to put this guard up and this protection up. But you've mentioned a couple of things I wanted to go back on. You mentioned, you know, on the inside you were just in turmoil, but you were still doing all these things. What made you continue to keep achieving those things, as you know, the most this and being voted that? What kept you driving when you internally you were just emotionally just destroyed? I think I really liked affirmation. To this day, that's my love language, affirmation. Somehow those things filled me, you know, or I thought it would fill these holes that were left. And to some degree I did, I guess, you know, like having companionship and admiration. It feels really good for 5 minutes, right? Until they move on to something else. Well, I'm sure at that level too, when you're in that position, anything that makes you feel good as far as people voting for you, like you said, are you getting voted in? Are you getting selected to this or that? That is things that you're looking for, anything that would help make you feel better. Again, we go back to how strong our mind is, right? And our mind is going to adjust. I mean, it's going to go towards things that make you feel better and about yourself. And you were looking for someone to accept you, right? And things of that nature back then. And I think that's probably it. But you did some amazing things. You mentioned a lot of things for all that to be going on. So, you know, I wonder today, it makes me sit here and think, you know, yes, you mentioned I have daughters and you know, their friends come over, and I wonder sometimes if any of these beautiful young girls that are just full of life are struggling internally, you know. You know, it just makes you really start kind of looking at things differently. Because as you said, I mean, you were one of them, right?
Yeah.
But we just didn't know all this was going on internally. So, wow. I mean, I sit here in awe again, and I've heard this story, but I hear it again, it still just makes me really, really, well, one, thankful that you're here, and two, that you're sharing it with us. So thank you again for sharing. But let's do this. Let's keep going. Okay. I love your story and how and I think we talked about this earlier too. There's so many parts of your story that I think people could connect with. Maybe not all of them.
Yeah.
But people are going to connect in different parts. The next one, as we're going into your college years, you took some of all these things that you've dealt with, right? We got to remember what you dealt with, what baggage, what your mental state was, things that you did. Like you just said, you finally kind of got that, what you called the thuggish attitude. You took this, and now you're off to college. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So let's just start with, like, I graduated high school, right? And this is a kind of funny now, but it wasn't funny at the time story. My dad, I had this Ford Escort, was it called an Escort? It's a little hatchback blue car that I had purchased myself for $1,000. So you can imagine how well it ran. It was a manual. It stalled going downhill, which was every day on the way to school. Like, it was in bad shape. So my dad, who thought he was like a shade tree mechanic, was like, come over to my house and I will fix it for you. I was like, okay, great. Free labor, right? So I got lost in the, woods around Bossier, Shreveport. And he was married to my last stepmother at the time named Pat. And anyway, he had to come get me. We show up. Pat is standing on the doorstep of their double wide saying, you need to get your butt in this house right now. You're in so much trouble. And I'm like, I just got here. Like, what happened? Well, it turns out that she had called my mother when I was lost, because before cell phones, remember, and said, just kind of got into a conversation. My mother, for whatever reason, let her in on some of our conflicts that we'd been having, because we're mother-daughter, 18-year-old girl, borrowing clothes, not taking care of them, stuff like that, So just typical. Well, what preceded was an hour and a half, if not more, of my sitting there on the sofa, listening to both of them tell me what a terrible person I was, what a terrible daughter I was. And at this point, I had gotten a music scholarship to Louisiana Tech, and I had a dance team scholarship. So I was on my way. I'd gotten accepted to college, ready to go. And they just ripped me up for an hour and a half. And my dad said, you're not going to go to college. There's no point. You're just going to drop out anyway. You're going to go down the street. You're going to get a job at the Dairy Queen. And you are going to start working and making a living, because that is really the only productive way you're going to, use your time. And I'm starting to panic, thinking, no one knows where I am. They could literally lock me in this bedroom and not let me out. Like, I panicked. So here is where the acting comes in, right? I figured the only way to get out was to cry. They wanted a rise out of me. So, and I knew this. So I started to fake cry, and I'm very convincing, by the way. So I fake cried. Within 5 minutes of my bringing tears to and apologizing how terrible, I'm so sorry, I'm such a terrible person, right? My dad got up, went and fixed my car. She got up, made me a sandwich. It's going to be okay, blah, blah, blah. And within 15 minutes, I was in my car leaving, saying, I will never come back, ever. Because it was starting to be clear to me that this was abusive behavior and that he did not want me to excel. He was not a cheerleader, If anything, he was like a leash trying to hold me back. And when I got home and I saw my mother, she and I had words. I was like, what in the world are you thinking? Like, do not tell them anything about us. So I didn't. I mean, from that day, I didn't go back to see my father unless I was with my brother, and that was rare. So I went to college, went to Louisiana Tech, and I had this like barrier up, right? And I started drinking and going to all the parties, and people were trying to rush me for sororities, and I didn't have the money for a sorority. Are you kidding me? I barely had money for books. So I was just going to the parties because I knew I couldn't rush, but I was like, I'm just going to go to the party, there, So, I mean, I drank myself into silly, and practically every other day there was this really sweet looking Barbie kind of girl who would come to my door in my dorm and say, hi, I'm Amanda, and I would really like to invite you to the Wesley Foundation. We're going to have a worship service, and we love Jesus. And I was like, I'm good, cute, you're cute and all, but move on, right? I'm going to a party. I'm busy, right?
That wall came up that you protected.
Do not bother me with your Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Even though, I'd grown up when going to my grandmother's church, I knew who the guy was. My dad was so-called a preacher at one point during his preacher phase, and so it wasn't like I didn't have a relationship, but I didn't lean into it, right? I was like, yeah, I'm good. Finally, one day she comes to my dorm and says, hey, and I just thought to myself, this girl does not let up. Like, she is like a dog with a bone. And she finally said, hey, we're going to have free pizza. And I was like, oh, now you're speaking my language. Food, I'm there. Because I did not have 2 pennies to rub together. What you have to understand is I was going to college fully on my own steam. No money from family, borrowed every cent I could, from the government and any scholarship I could grab, right? So I was really on my own. And at this point, the Ford had died because my father obviously is not a good mechanic. And so I didn't even have a car. So I was just like, I was doing my best to do my best. So I go to the Wesley Foundation, which for those of you who don't know, it's a Methodist student union, right? And it's a Christian organization. And I walk in that door and there's all these people and they're like coming at me, hugging me. Like, I was like, oh, no, do not, don't touch me. And then I go into this worship service and up to this point I had been like kind of relegated to Southern Baptist church, like little wooden church in the woods kind of thing. So there was no hand clapping. There was the best you got was amen. Like after a performance, you got an amen. That was good. That was
Right.
right.
That's right.
But I go into this Wesley Foundation, there's drums and there's guitars and there's people singing and there's like, like it's bumping and I'm like, oh, this is weird, man. Like, when's a snake going to come out? Like, I just was, this is not my jam. So I had my pizza and then the student, like the student minister there was like, his name was Andy, I'll never forget. And he said, hey, it was so great to meet you. And at the time, my middle name is Nicole. So everybody called me Nikki. Thanks, Nikki, for coming. Come back anytime for any reason. You just come on back. I was like, right. So I went about my business. About a month later, and you'll recall this time. For those who are young, there was a time when not everybody had a computer. And there was a time when you had to go to computer labs to print things out. And it was on a dot matrix printer. And it was like special paper you had to buy and it was expensive. So I'll go to this computer lab and it's literally across the street from Wesley Foundation. And I run out of paper. And I was like, okay, well, Andy said anything, if I need anything at all. So me being the manipulative person that I learned how to be, I was like, I'm just going to go get the paper. I'll learn a little small talk and I'll go back, I went there and never left. I went there and Andy was there and I don't know what he said to me to get me to stick around to talk to him, but he really just showed an interest in me. He was like, hey, I'm so glad you're back. Like, what's going on with you? Oh, you need some paper? Absolutely. You know what? You can use my printer, actually, if you need something, And then just like all these people I started talking to, and I found myself going back over and over again and developing this community. And I started to really think about my life and what I wanted out of my life. And I was alone in my dorm room and I accepted Christ again in my heart and said, I can't do this by myself. I'm really dark here. I don't want to be dark anymore. And it took several months for me to get there. Right. And nobody was trying to get me to either. It was just relationship and learning that people could actually care about you without wanting something from you. And I think that was a big revelation for me. And I tell people this, and I swear I'm not exaggerating, but like I prayed that prayer in my dorm room by myself, fell asleep on my bed, deepest sleep I think I've ever had. Woke up the next day and it was like everything was brighter. It was like going from the black and white version of Wizard of Oz to the color. Everything was brighter. Everything felt better. Everything smelled better. Everything tasted better. I was just like, this is really weird. Like, I feel like I've taken some sort of drug, right? And I started really leaning into the faith and developing these relationships who to this day are cherished. I will never forget the people that carried me along on that journey. And I met a guy named Joey.
Now, was this through the Wesley Foundation or was this through, okay.
This was Wesley Foundation. And he and I were new believers again. Like at the same time, we were both getting rid of vices. Like we didn't want to drink anymore. We didn't want to so we were both in the same journey. Okay. So long story short, we spent 2 years together dating and he asked me to marry him and we got engaged and everybody was thrilled and I was 19. I mean, can you imagine like 19 years old? I guess I was going on 20 and I was like, oh, this is great. He was going to be a pastor and I was going to be a pastor's wife and it was going to be great. And that summer, and I should say, because I'd had such a lurid past, right? I I was very sexually active and drinking and everything. He also, so we decided to have a very chaste relationship. We did not want to tempt ourselves, so we didn't kiss the whole time we were dating. We didn't even hold hands. It was just a loving relationship. We really wanted to focus on the faith, right? So that summer, he decided he'd had enough of that and tried kissing me out of the blue, and I just started to cry. And he said, you're not feeling anything, are you? And I was like, no. And I'd had a series of very abusive relationships up to this point too. So this was really the first really healthy dating relationship I'd had. And it was horrible for me to have to give that up. But over time, after we talked to a counselor and we talked and prayed about it, he called me up one day and said, I can't do anything but pray about this and think about it. And I said, I think I'm going to go home for a little bit to see my mom. And he said, okay, what are you going to do with the ring? And I felt like he had made his decision and just didn't want to say it. So I left the ring on the desk and then started making, I didn't know what to do next. And then I felt led to move to Texas. Didn't know anybody. Moved myself to SFA after I got accepted. I applied and had to leave everything behind. I left all my friends. I left, because I knew in my heart that Joey, being such an introverted person, would have a harder time starting over, and I didn't want our friends to have to choose. But when I say that our engagement broke off, I mean, I had the wedding dress, we had the chapel, we were shopping for bridesmaid dresses, like it was happening. And I just, it broke me, and I moved to Texas, started going to SFA and had to start everything over.
So did you go, so you went back to Louisiana for the summer, or did you go straight to, did you go home for the summer? Is that what you're saying?
Well, at the time, my mother lived in a condo and I was sleeping on the sofa. So it really wasn't like a very hospitable place for me to stay. So I did go back to Tech for summer school. Ended up living with a girl in her mobile home for a while and took some classes while I was figuring out my next steps. And I'll remember he came and asked me back. But I threw that wall up. And I was
so
like, no.
What made you, I guess let's talk about some of the decisions you made. You chose to, I guess after y'all decided to end the relationship and you were okay with that, you felt like it was the right thing, or did you, what was some of the decision? What did you go through there? Were you okay with the separation, or you just wasn't ready for a relationship at that time? Is that kind of where you were at? Is that
my heart was broken. I was heartbroken. I didn't eat for weeks. I didn't sleep very well. I think Joey was struggling with maybe the decision, and maybe he, I don't know because we haven't really talked it out.
Yeah, right.
We didn't really see each other. We saw each other one time after that years later. I feel like maybe he was thinking that he was attracted to someone else. I don't know.
Right.
But I know that like when he asked me back, he wrote me like a 4-page letter. I was broke. I'd learned, when somebody hurts you, you can't let them keep hurting. Right. So I just threw that wall up and I said no. And that led me to Texas though. So,
Right. And as you know, now you look back on it, faith was involved with, your decisions, but what made you choose? And then you just said, hey, Texas, right? I know now I love me some Texas, but what made you choose Texas and SFA?
Okay, so this is going to sound really bizarre for those who don't believe, but I will tell you, there have been a very, very few handful of times when I've heard God tell me something. And I'd been doing a lot of praying after this happened, not knowing what to do next. And I heard God say to me, you need to go to Texas. And I always argue when he does this for some reason, like I know what I'm doing, right? And I just said, but I don't know anyone in Texas. He was like, go to Texas. And I had a friend who I had been a camp counselor with the summer before. His name was Chris. And he had mentioned SFA. That was literally the only school I knew of in Texas. So I was like, I guess I'll apply to SFA. Like didn't know. And this was early days of internet too. So it wasn't like you could just Google. Google didn't even exist yet, right? So I was
That's
like,
right. That's
guess
right.
I'm applying to SMA.
Well, awesome. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, we're glad you came to Texas, but I just was curious of that decision making and what you were your thoughts were going through that. So
There was
okay,
absolutely no strategy.
okay, okay. So, and again, I mean, we keep going over it, but you keep pushing through. You keep hitting the walls, right? You keep hitting things. We're talking about adversity, right? You've mentioned adversity on every stage of your life, and again, I mean, going to college, you get in a relationship who at the time you thought was a serious relationship, and it was going to be the perfect. And again, then that changes.
Yeah.
You just keep pushing forward. Is there any? I guess what I want to say is I want to go, Miranda. What in that mind you have got some amazing mechanisms in your mind that helps you push through adversity. What is it that you feel like that just keep every time you hit a wall like that you can just you dust off and you keep going? What is it that makes Miranda keep pushing in that way?
You know, I don't know. I just flashed back to like this game my brother used to play with me when I was little, right?
Mm-hmm.
He used to shove me down to see how many times I'd get back up. And I think I would wear him out. He would say, forget it, I'm done. Because I kept getting back up. And I just kind of feel like that sort of is my, I don't know, it's kind of metaphor for my life, right?
Well, that's kind of been your life. Yeah. So if you think about it, you just keep getting back up and
I just think it's like you say, there's no options, right? I could sit down and cry. I could stay down in the mud and count all of the reasons it's unfair.
Yeah.
I mean, tell you, when I went and had to ask for the deposit back on my wedding dress in a small town in Louisiana where everybody knows everybody and everybody knew who I was marrying, was the most humiliating thing I've ever had to do. And not the most, but one of the most humiliating things I've ever done. And I think at that point you go, all right, this is a dead end. I'm turning around at this dead end. Where am I going? I can't just sit here at this dead end. Can't idle. I have to do something next. And I also just lean on, what does God want me to do next? I mean, I could choose a road and go down it, but it doesn't mean it's the right one.
You bring that up, and I love that you brought up no options, right? Because I obviously those are my words that I love, and I love that because you're a definition of pushing through no options. But you're right. I mean, you got to a point where, and it goes back to one of my 3 steps is grow or die. It's how we talk, it's how we think, and it's what we do, right? How are you thinking? What are you pushing through? Because you could go around talking about how bad life is and how I'm mistreated and I haven't had the opportunities you have. Or you could go around and say, I'm this and I'm that and this, they mistreated me. But you just kept pushing through as though you had no options. And that's what I love the story of, and again, we're not even through your story completely, but the things that you have shown as far as I'm talking to the people out there right now. If you're pushing whatever it is we're dealing with, right? I mean, and life is still going on for you, right? We wake up every day. You probably woke up today with something, right? I mean, yesterday I was getting tires on my truck, right? And I mean, I had adversity yesterday through that, right? There's things we deal with every day, whether it's through health and finances and relationships.
Yeah.
But you unfortunately got equipped early on in your life of dealing with adversity, and you're continuing to show it. But I just want to continue to encourage people through stories like yours that, man, life's too short, right? Why? I mean, we can, and one of my favorite coaches told me this a while back. He said, we can either get bitter or we can get better.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we can get bitter about the situation, or we can get better. And you've definitely shown of getting better. So, okay, not to stop the story. Let's keep moving. Let's get, you're still in college. You now have moved to SFA. Tell us about that.
Well, I quickly got plugged into Sigma Phi Lambda, which is a Christian kind of service sorority, and I met some great people. And I just, that's really when I got heavily into the Miss Texas pageant system. Mm-hmm. And again, it was a scholarship opportunity. So I was working at the Nacogdoches Daily Sentinel as a writer while I was going to school. So I was working my way through school. Sorry, my cat.
That's all right.
I was working my way through school as a journalist, and again, didn't have family support. So I was doing it all on my own. Getting the scholarships on the weekend. So like if I won like a first place or won a crown, I would get some sort of money, right? $500, mm-hmm. And it all helped. And then at one point I had to drop down to part-time and work full-time at the Lufkin paper so that I could afford to, continue college. It was just, I had to bob and weave, I had to find
a way.
Find the path. It took me like 5 years to graduate for that reason, but I, switched to journalism before I left tech. So I was.
Well, Miranda, can I stop you there just to make you feel better? It took me over 5 years, and I didn't have near the story you have. So it makes you feel better.
Thank you. Well, and there were a lot of people like professors and stuff that helped me along the way because I was not a naturally gifted student. I'll tell you that much. But I was a good writer, and I knew that, so I was able to lean into that. But yeah, I was doing the pageant system, and I really grew with that. I learned a lot of skills that I think really benefit me today. And so, if anybody bashes pageants, I can just say there's some good stuff that comes out of them. So don't hate on them too hard. And then I dated a few people. A couple people that I really adored, and the relationships just didn't go anywhere. And then towards the end of the very last semester, I met someone in I think it was a Dale Carnegie course, and he was just a sweet, fun, cute guy, and we started dating and didn't have any big major plans to stay together. But I graduated. I was the first person in my class to graduate. I'm sorry, in my family, not my class. First person in my family to get a 4-year degree.
Awesome.
And that was a big deal. This moment was big for me because leading up to this, my father and I had talked very rarely, but anytime he would see me at like holiday gatherings or something, he wouldn't know how old I was. That was something that I always had to he would argue with me about. And then can you imagine like not knowing how old your children are? I mean, anyway. Then he would always say, well, have you dropped out of college yet? The expectation was I wasn't going to finish. The expectation was I was going to fail. And it sort of drove me to finish, right? So when I was faced with the dilemma on whether I invited him to my college graduation or not, I struggled. And I even talked to my mom, and I was like, what do I do? Because if I invite him and he doesn't show, then it's just like, man, I let him get away with it again. I let him get away with disappointing me again.
Right.
If I don't invite him, then I don't have to worry about being disappointed. And she said, well, invite him because that way you did your part, right? So I reluctantly sent the invite. He said he was going to come. That was huge. My grandmother was definitely going to be there because she was my biggest supporter, and he was supposed to bring her. The day before my graduation, and I didn't know this until after the fact, but the day before my graduation, he pulled out and said, I'm not going. And my grandmother said, well, I'm going. So she got a friend to drive her all the way from Louisiana. And I'm talking, it's a 7-hour drive. And this woman was not young, all the way there to see me graduate. And I just remember that moment being like, this is it. This is the last time I'm letting him do this to me. This is the last time. And then I disowned him that summer. I actually wrote him a letter telling him he was not allowed back in my life, and he was not going to meet my children. He was not going to come to my wedding, and he didn't come to my wedding, and he didn't meet my children for a really long time. But that's another story. But then I graduated, and I was really excited because I thought, this is my ticket out of poverty. This is my ticket out of the trailer
Sure.
park. This is my ticket out of all of the trappings that I know historically have been in my family. And I went home to see my mom and wasn't feeling great. Took a pregnancy test and I was pregnant. And I didn't even give it a second thought. I just said, in that moment, looking at that pregnancy test and seeing it was positive, the only thing I thought was, all of the work that I've done for the past 5 years to get out of the situation that I was born into is about to repeat itself. Like, I didn't do anything better for this child because I'm going to end up in a trailer park struggling to feed myself and my child, saddled to someone I don't love, and all of it I just thought, I can't do that. And so I went up to my mom. My mom was upstairs. I went up and said, I'm pregnant. And she was like, oh no. She'd been here, She said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to get an abortion. It just wasn't even a question. I didn't talk to the guy about it. I just made a decision. To this day, I wish that I would have had more wisdom in that, but I was panicked, I was terrified.
Sure.
I had Miss Louisiana in 2 months, and I was like, I can't move forward in my life. I was thinking about, how am I supposed to provide a future for myself or this person that I'm bringing in the world? And I said, yeah, I'm going to drive up to Texas and do it. And she was like, no, I'm going to drive you. And I know she didn't want to. I know that she wanted to talk me out of it, but she didn't try. She was just like, this is your choice. This is your decision. I went there. I had the procedure, paid cash because I didn't want anybody to trace me. And I guess I was really delirious. I remember being kind of, they knock you out. And I remember being knocked out and having this sort of dream-like situation where it was like I was facing God, right? And it was just a big white light, really. I was facing God and I was like apologizing profusely. And then he turned his face away from me and it was devastating. I just started crying. And I guess I was really delirious because they ended up pushing me out on a wheelchair out to a back stoop. I remember very vaguely, back stoop with steps, and leaving me there until my mother could come around back and get me. I was like a piece of trash, right? And I was so sick and so delirious. My mother had to call in reinforcements. She had a best friend that lived up there where we were. And I stayed there for like 2 days and I was sick as a dog. I slept and threw up. That was pretty much my life. And for anybody who thinks that it's just like a fly-by-night, no big deal, it's a big deal and it's a painful thing and it's an emotionally taxing thing. And it is something that this is the first time I'm talking about. Like this past year is the first time I've really talked about it. Even my husband didn't know until last year. And so I developed this mindset from a young age of you put your blinders on, right? And you don't look at the peripheral and you don't look behind you. You just move forward. Because if you stop long enough to look around you at what you're dealing with, then you might not move forward. You might stay right where you are. So I just kept going forward. I was like, okay, next stop. I've already got an apartment in Texas. I've got a job secured in Texas. That's where we're going next. Like first, Miss Louisiana, and then we're just going to keep moving. I didn't even stop long enough to think about what happened. And
that's a good point you bring. I mean, I want to catch that because you said some really amazing things that to not slow down and look at the situation, right? I mean, just to keep pushing forward, I think says a lot about people that are going through adversity, and if we can sit and dwell on our, because we've all made mistakes. There's no one here that has not made mistakes, have not made choices that we wish we wouldn't have. But sometimes we just got to push through and keep. And you said it really well. I mean, don't stop long enough to let it catch up with you, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good point for people to listen to. We may look back on it later and say that we did this or we shouldn't have did this. But at the time, for you to mentally push through, don't slow down. And I think that's a great point that you made. And Miranda, I know it's really hard for you to share this, but I will tell you the impact that you are having on people that I hope, because I know there's a lot of women that are going through it, have gone through it, that just have never really realized how to maybe express it, or should they express it, or whatever that looks like. But thank you for sharing, because I think it goes back to even like with me. I used to not like to talk about my story, right? But when you can help others, when I realized the day that I went and told my story at a gathering at my wife's family's, and several of them called and texted me to sign up, say, I'm going to be an organ donor after hearing your story.
Mm-hmm.
That made me realize, why am I being so selfish and not telling my story? And I think it goes right back to what you're doing and sharing, because there's a lot of women out there that I think need to hear what you're talking about. So thank you for being extremely strong and doing that. And because I think, again, there's a lot of people that really need to hear that.
Thank you. I mean, it is hard. There's still a lot of shame, right? Especially as someone who's a believer, and you're expected to do the right things. And I know that for a lot of people, it's hard to understand. It's hard to hold those two things in your head. You're a Christian, but you did this thing. Well, there are Christians who are alcoholics. So it's like there are things we do in our lives that we're not proud of, right? But I will say this. The pushing through is good to do. But in this case, there was trauma that I didn't deal with for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that, yes, pushing through is important, but having someone who can counsel you through it is also important when you're dealing with something like this, with trauma. And it's so important to, I wish I would have unpacked it sooner. I wish I would have talked to Dan about it sooner, because he really wanted to be part of my healing process. And when I told him, the hardest part for him was thinking I didn't trust him enough to share it with him. So there are people in your life who will understand and love you anyway. And you would be surprised at how many women there are in the Christian community alone who have dealt with this and are afraid to talk about it.
Well, we talk about it all the time. I was talking to a friend a while back, and I was telling him, I'm Crystal and I are members of church, and we're Christians, and we're engaged in the church. The thing is, though, is that, man, I'm the first one, and anybody that knows me, I was a sinner, man, and I am a sinner. We all have made bad choices. I could go on a list a mile long of things, and I think anybody can. But that's what Christianity was about. If you look back, it wasn't just a lot of really good people doing all the right things.
Right. That's right.
So I applaud you for coming out and speaking on that. But I want to move on, because I want to talk about this. I want you to, through all of that, right here at the end, I want you to come into a closing here and talk about fighting through adversity, fighting through all that, pushing through challenges, pushing through, when you went through an abortion, when you as a child being, mistreated, and all of those things. It was worth pushing through, because you were able to meet Dan.
Yes.
And now you have you have a JT who's 21, Bo who's 17. You have a great family involved with the community. So talk a little bit about where you met Dan, and then I want to stop there, because then I want to bring you right into what you're doing now after that. So tell us a little bit about meeting Dan and opening up this whole new world, and what the fight was really all about.
Yeah. So after Miss Louisiana, I moved to Austin back in the cool days, and it looked a lot like New Orleans, right? Working for this really, crappy paper, to be honest with you. I was like the only employee, and just kind of being the young person I was with my own apartment and all that. Well, that went bust, right, real quick. So 3 months after this very expensive education, I was waiting tables, and then eventually applied to and got hired at Children at Heart Ministries, which at the time was just Texas Baptist Children's Home in Round Rock. So it's grown since then. And the man who headed up that organization was Jerry Bradley. It was. Very formidable man, very wise. And about 2 months after I started working there, his son came in for a party we were throwing, and they introduced me. Jerry and his wife, Linda, introduced me to him, and it was Dan. And he shook my hand and said, I know you. You were in my psychology class at SFA. Now, at this point, he lived in Dallas, so he didn't even live in Round Rock at the time. We should not have met, right? It was just like, and I was like, we did? And he said, yeah. He said, you used to sit in the front row. You used to have a brown bag that you carried with you, and you always had a Coke in your hand, because I have this vice of Cokes. I used to. And I was like, and it was a night class, so I wasn't like purdy, I wasn't like, I was coming in my sweats and whatever. And he was like, yeah, I remember you. And I was like, huh, interesting, because I do not remember you. And it just kind of evolved. He lived in Dallas. I lived in Austin. Eventually we became weekend warriors. And a year later, he transferred with his company to be closer to me. And 5 months later, asked me to marry him. And then we got married 5 months later. So it's been 24 years. It'll be 25 next year. And it's been great. I mean, being part of the Bradley family brought me into a stability that I'd never known. Like, his parents were very, very civically involved. His sister still is. And we kind of became this juggernaut, I guess, of like what people look at as leaders in the community. And I take that, I don't take that lightly. Ty, it's something you have, it's a privilege, to have that opportunity.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. And I worked at that place for 8 years before I had Bo. And Bo came along, and I decided I did not want to drop my kids off at 7:00 in the morning and pick them up at 5:30 anymore. It was breaking my heart to do that with JT. So I started my own marketing firm, Be Creative, which you're aware of, and did that for 15 years. And it was awesome. I did marketing for nonprofits and small businesses, and took what I learned through that job, and was able to be home with my kiddos, which was important to me. It's not the only way to do it, but it was important to me as they're growing up. And then when they stopped wanting to hang out with me, I decided to start thinking about a different path. But it was really crazy how, when you look back on your life and you go, there were all these like pavers that God placed for me to step on. Mm-hmm. You don't see the road that they make until you look back. And when I think about all of the things that led me to Texas, all of the things that led me to Austin, all of the things that led me to work at the children's home, which honestly I never would have done on my own, right? I mean, a nonprofit work was not in my wheelhouse. I was supposed to be the next Katie Couric, right? This was not what I was supposed to do. I fell in love with it, right? And I developed a new love and a new passion.
You talked about all these challenges getting through life and getting through college. But guys, I want to tell you something too. This is where, I'm super proud of Miranda. Is not only as she fought through and she battled just to get to college, just to even be there. And then, so just recently, Miranda, tell us what you were able to do with your marketing company. You were successful, and then you had the opportunity to go to work, and then just recently achieve something that I want you to tell us about.
Yes. So I got an opportunity to go to work at the University of Texas at Austin, Hookham, for Macomb School of Business, which is one of the top business schools in the country, y'all, as the marketing manager for the development external relations, so working with donors and fundraising. And I'm now the senior associate director over there for marketing communications. And that's been amazing. It's been an incredible journey. But as part of that, I was able to participate in their tuition assistance. So I was able to get my master's degree, which I'm in my last semester of right now. And I will, as of December, be a Longhorn grad, which is exciting. So I'm getting my master's degree in advertising. I will be the only one in my family that has not just one, but 2 degrees. And
That's awesome.
what's really exciting to me is that my grandmother turns 101 in September. And she always wanted to go to college and just didn't have the opportunity. So I'm really hoping she can make it, because I feel like I'm doing it as much for her as I am for me. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, that says a lot. And again, I'm super proud of you for pushing through all of that. But I hope through all of this that we just heard today, that you've encouraged me, and I know there's others out there that are, it may just be the freshman kid that's, as we all know, college is tough.
Yeah.
But college is extremely tough when you don't have any finances, you don't have a support team, when you don't have people there. Gosh, I mean, I can't even imagine. So I want to pull this all back together and go, guys, if you can't, through listening to Miranda about living life as we have no options, right? She proved that multiple times through her life, through her college years, and now even into her career and her marriage, of just when adversity hits, we put that, as she puts her guard on, as we strengthen up, as we go into our no options approach, right? Yeah. And you live it as though we don't have an option. There's no plan B. You just make it happen. And I truly believe Miranda has been a big example to all of us on how that works. And Miranda, I don't really know other than to say thank you for sharing all this. And guys, I will tell you, Miranda is extremely helpful in helping others in many ways. She just listening to her today helps me. It makes me sometimes feel like I need to put on my tighten up my shoelaces and get after it a little bit more. But she continues to help people. It's not a one and done and check that box. She continues to strive and get better. And I encourage you guys to continue, whatever it is you're dealing with, whatever it is you're going through this at this time, continue to push through, because it's worth it on the other side. And I know, again, Miranda, thank you for sharing with us today. And is there any last words that you'd like to share with us before we go?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been my honor, first of all, and I'm grateful to, again, have the opportunity to talk about anything. And I'm not special, okay? And you don't have
But you are, Miranda, you are.
Well, I mean, you don't have to achieve a master's degree, or you can, whatever it is you're going through, doesn't matter what it is. It could be just, you're fighting through addiction, or you're fighting through just depression or whatever. All it takes is putting one foot in front of the other, because every step leads to a journey. And I think that all of us have it in us to push through. It's not easy. There are times you're going to feel defeated, and there are going to find times you just want to sit in the corner and cry and give up. But that's when you got to dig deeper, because that's not going to that feeling's not going to last forever. And I promise you, there's beauty on the other side of that journey, whatever it is you're dealing with. Yeah.
Beautiful words. Those are beautiful words. Thank you, Miranda. And guys, as she said, don't slow down. Keep pushing forward, and go live life as though if you have no options. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to No Options. If this episode spoke to you, please take a moment and leave a review. And more importantly, please share it with someone who may need to hear it. You can find more stories, resources, and ways to connect over at my website, tygibson.com. And that is Gibson with a P, TYGIPSON.com. Remember, no matter where you are, your story isn't over yet if you live like you have no options. I'll see you next time.
You know Ty Gibson is an entrepreneur, a relentless survivor. Did you know he's also a powerhouse speaker? After overcoming 3 transplants and juvenile diabetes, he built thriving businesses with one mantra: no options. Ty transforms adversity into action. His keynotes ignite audiences with real-world resilience and 30-plus years of sales mastery. Are you ready to inspire your team? Book Ty Gibson today as your next speaker. You can call 512-944-4780 or head over to tygibson.com. That's Gibson with a P. It's time for your event to share the motivation that is no options.